May 1940. Over 330,000 British, French, and Belgian troops are pinned against the English Channel at the port of Dunkirk. Behind them is the sea. In front of them, the entire German war machine is closing the trap. Then the tanks stop. The leading edge of the German panzer divisions is just 15 kilometers away. But instead of pushing forward to crush the trapped Allied army, the German advance mysteriously halts for 3 full days. For decades, a popular theory explained this pause as a diplomatic calculation. The idea is that Adolf Hitler deliberately held his forces back, offering a golden bridge to spare the British and force them to the negotiating table. The primary piece of evidence used to support this theory is a document known as Hitler's Political Testament. In it, there is a specific quote where he explicitly claims, "I purposefully spared the fleeing British at Dunkirk." But that document is a fake. Modern analysis reveals it is a post-war forgery concocted by a Swiss Nazi sympathizer named François Genoux. The entire premise that a merciful dictator handed the Allies a miraculous reprieve is based on a lie. The actual order to halt the tanks didn't come from Berlin. It came from General Gerd von Rundstedt, the commander of Army Group A. Looking at this topographical map of the Dunkirk pocket, you can see exactly why he made that call. The area around Flanders is low-lying, marshy terrain filled with ditches and canals, ground that is incredibly hostile to heavy armor. On top of that, after weeks of constant combat, up to half of von Rundstedt's tanks were broken down and in desperate need of repair. Rather than risk his remaining armor in the mud, von Rundstedt found a willing partner in Hermann Göring. Göring arrogantly promised that his air force, the Luftwaffe, could wipe out the trapped Allied forces from above. When Hitler visited von Rundstedt's headquarters on May 24th, he simply agreed with a decision that had already been made. He rubber-stamped the general's logistical pause and let Göring take the glory. The German halt was a pragmatic military reset, mixed with an inter-branch power play. There was zero intention of letting anyone escape. To actually survive those 3 days, the Allied forces had to fight, and that defense was anchored by the commander of the British Expeditionary Force, Lord Gort. This tactical map shows a fatal flaw in the Allied perimeter. On May 25th, the Belgian line to the east began collapsing, opening a massive gap. In a severe breach of his orders, Gort diverted 2 of his divisions, the 5th and 50th, away from a planned southern counterattack, sending them east to plug the hole. Further south, the map shows another desperate situation at the Siege of Lille. Here, 40,000 men of the French First Army found themselves completely encircled by 7 full German divisions. Surrounded and cut off, the French held their ground for 4 solid days. They fought until they literally ran out of ammunition, successfully tying down 3 armored divisions that otherwise would have been sent straight to the beaches of Dunkirk. Every single hour of the German delay was purchased. It was bought by Gort's tactical foresight and paid for by the sacrifice of French soldiers fighting in the rearguard. Across the Channel, deep inside the chalk tunnels of Dover, Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay was tasked with getting those men off the beaches in an effort called Operation Dynamo. This cross-section illustrates his main problem. The coastal waters off Dunkirk slope very gradually. A standard deep-draft naval destroyer simply could not get close enough to the beach to pick up the troops. Ramsay's solution was to bypass military channels entirely. He requisitioned over 800 civilian vessels, fishing trawlers, pleasure yachts, and fireboats to act as a shallow water shuttle service, ferrying men from the sand to the larger warships waiting offshore. For the troops on the ground, this meant wading out into shoulder-deep water and standing perfectly still for hours, exposed on the flat sand while dive bombers strafed the lines. Over 338,000 men were eventually pulled from the water. The extraction worked because of a massive, improvised logistical network between the Navy and civilian sailors. So why did the myth of Hitler's intentional pause survive for so long? After the war, defeated German generals needed an excuse for their failures. Blaming a dead dictator's meddling was convenient, and forged documents like the Political Testament gave the story academic cover. When you strip away the fake history, you are left with the hard mechanics of the evacuation: broken tank engines, deep, muddy swamps, bloody rearguard actions, and a fleet of civilian boats. The British Expeditionary Force survived because a coalition of soldiers, sailors, and civilians fought for every inch of sand and sea.